In some senses, he can't. Even if he wins, he can't win, because if he wins, he will have beaten Count Binface.
The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people and organisations who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in your world in 2026, then hit us up at dunstreet.com.au. And we've had a few new Patreon subscribers lately. So we want to thank Caitlin, Jody, John, Reed, Joan, Peter, Bron and Natalie for signing up as a member of our Patreon community. Thank you for your support. And as a paid subscriber, you're now entitled to a Socially Democratic welcome pack. So please check your DMs on the Patreon app for a message from our producer, because we'll need to get your mailing address and send it out to you in the post. And as always, thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers. We really appreciate your financial support to keep the show running. And if you'd like to become a Patreon subscriber, then just click on the link in the show notes and sign up today. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one on a Wednesday evening on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. And it is mid-August, and that means we do our mailbag episode. And what that means is we ask our Patreon subscribers to send us some questions, and then we have some people come on the show who know better than I what the answers to those questions are. She is the former Chief of Staff to the most successful Labor Premier in the history of the state of Victoria, and now is a managing partner at Foster, McCrone, Ratcliff and Sims Advisory, and she is a regular co-host of mine for our mailbag episodes. Lissie Ratcliff, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Stephen.
Normally I introduce Todd Pinkerton from Unions New South Wales, but Todd is on leave at the moment, which implies that we pay him. we don't. But
Todd post.
Yeah, exactly. Todd's got a bit on at the moment, so it's just you and me, kiddo, for this episode.
True.
But before we do jump into the first question, just want to remind our listeners based here in Victoria, or anyone that might be in Melbourne next week. We're doing a live recording of the Feeney Files with Jesse McCrone. It's at Trades Hall next Thursday night, the 20th of August. Doors open at 6:30. It starts at 7:30 p.m. It's a fundraiser. Tickets are now available, and they are $95 each, but every single cent of that money goes to 4 campaigns that are marginal, critical battleground races for the Labor Party at the Victorian state election in November. The seats of Eureka, which is Michaela Settle, the seat of Monbulk, which is Daniela DiMartino, the seat of Cranbourne, which is Pauline Richards, and the seat of Narre North, which is Belinda Wilson. So if you want to give a bit of financial support to these incredibly talented Labor women in critical battleground races, which is going to be 3-way contest between us, the Libs and One Nation, then please come along to the show and enjoy what I would call a boozy branch meeting at Trades Hall with a whole bunch of other comrades. It should be a great night. Just a reminder, tickets for our last live show in Melbourne actually sold out a week in advance. And I remember I was scrambling to try and fit people into the auditorium that we had in last time. May have broken some laws around the amount of people we can get into one room, but nonetheless, we've got a bigger space this time. So we hope it will be well attended. So make sure you buy your ticket. There are links to buying the tickets in the show notes for today's episode, as well as if you go onto our Instagram account, in the bio there, the Socially Democratic Instagram account, in the bio, there's a link to the tickets as well. And bring as many friends as you possibly can. Lissie, I know you'll be there.
Indeed.
Good. Let's go to the first question. And the first question comes from Roger. And Roger asks, as a member of the Australian Education Union, what do you think the Carroll government needs to do to finally get this agreement over the line? And how can the Australian Education Union shut down the Victorian socialists that have hijacked the process? So for those of you outside of Victoria, there is currently negotiations going on for the next enterprise bargaining agreement or collective agreement or whatever they call it in Victoria. Is it a collective agreement? Yeah.
ABA.
EBA, yeah.
Yep.
Between the public school teachers and the Victorian state government. And it's sort of trundling along. I might get you, Lissie, to take a first swing at this, but maybe give us a bit of background to what's transpired in this this round of negotiations and where we're up to right now.
Yeah, so this has been a tricky one for the government to land, and it's been running for quite a while. Probably a little bit unusually, it's been the last two offers have been voted down by AEU members, one of which had been specifically endorsed by the union and was still shot down. But the backstory that sort of, if you go back a few years to this, is that the last EBA was done in, I think it was 2022, it'd be 4 years ago. And I think in retrospect or in hindsight, the union and maybe its members are not thrilled with the deal that they agreed to at that time. So this round is both trying to deal with the current set of asks and probably trying to do a bit of catch up from what they got last time, which makes it difficult for the government, obviously, in the current climate. But they are. It has been a sort of a pretty hard-fought battle. There's been industrial action, including strikes, and there is another strike currently scheduled for next Wednesday, which for obvious reasons the government is trying to or keen to avert. So it's one of those things, teachers going on strike impacts a lot of people right across the state all the time. So it is definitely something the government will be keen to get wrapped up as soon as humanly possible. But it is fair to say, I think, that the union has struggled to, one, read its membership to begin with, and two, to get them to coalesce around an offer.
Yeah, looking at this from afar, as these negotiations have continued, it seems to me as though the government, originally the Allen government, and now the Carroll government, but Ben Carroll at the time was the education minister, so
yep.
It was I guess it was under his carriage anyway. But the Victorian government really couldn't get on the same page with the union itself. But then if you look inside the union, it looks like the union leadership, the elected union leadership, the secretary and branch officials are struggling to get a sense of what the membership want as well. And that played out when the union leadership endorsed an agreement and it was rejected by the membership. That's never a great thing from a union's leadership perspective, trust me. But it also appears that the membership itself can't seem to get on the same page as well. And this was something I wasn't aware of until I started to read a little bit more, is that there's a lot of, and Roger sort of asks as part of his question, how can the AU shut down the Victorian socialists that have hijacked the process? What I, from my sort of half-assed internet research, discovered that it's not actually just the Victorian socialists. It's a lot more complicated than that. There are actually three groups, not one, within the broader union membership that are agitating, and they come from, I guess you would say, a socialist school of thought, but they themselves don't necessarily get on with one another either.
There's factions within the socialist faction.
Yeah. And I think maybe Chip LeGrand or someone wrote about it a while back and sort of talked about the whole Life of Brian, Monty Python kind of People's Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front and the Popular Front, because you've got the socialists in school, which is, I think, run by Socialist Alternative. Then there's this Fight the Crisis Solidarity, which is a different mob entirely. And then there's the Committee for Public Education, which is the Socialist Equality Party that just want to abolish the AEU altogether. And so there's these big arguments within these groups about things like what day to hold the strike. And so this is all playing out now. So in my mind, if I was a union organizer, I'm thinking, how widespread are these ginger groups within the membership, and how reflective are they of the broader union membership? Because I think that maybe as a union organizer, you're less likely to be able to win the support of those types of groupings within the broader union, and actually start to appeal to just regular, what I'd call mainstream teachers that just kind of really want, and find out what they actually want. What are the things that will get them over the line? I don't think you're going to win the hearts and minds of, fight the crisis solidarity group, but you are going to win the hearts and minds of regular teachers who just want to go to school and teach their kids, but want to be remunerated for it appropriately. And I guess somewhere that's where the sweet spot would be for the leadership. But not a great thing for a union leadership to have a deal rejected after you've sat in a room with the government and said, okay, I think we can get this over the line, and then not get it over the line.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think the deal that's currently out for out to the membership to vote at the moment, the union has specifically not endorsed a position on it, so they're not recommending it to their members. They're not recommending it either. They're just neutral. They're just putting it and saying, what do you want to do? Having been burned before, I can see the logic in that. But I think there's a couple of issues here. One with this agreement. One is that there's a very big wage ask included in it. But the other one is around things like reduced class time, reduced class sizes, those sorts of things, which obviously cost the government money but don't go straight into wages. And I think struggling to pull all of that together in the current fiscal environment has been difficult. The union, I think the question asked, what can the government do? Well, the government's current offer has added, among other things, a sign-on bonus. So that'll be cash in hand for everybody if they do sign up to it. I think the second time it went down, the margin that it went down was smaller. And these things tend to sort of, the longer it goes on, the more people get sick of having to hold out and take strike action, and they just want the deal done. But the government will certainly be hoping, given it's not much more than 100 days before the election, that it gets done next week. I suspect the AU's leadership will be hoping similarly.
51% rejected on the 21st of July. So compared to, what was it before that? 57.7%. So it's, they're getting closer. Look, I mean, it'll be fascinating. Like if with this sort of sugar hit offer, if they reject that, I'm not sure where the government can go from here, because it just feels like it's a structural thing they have to change, right?
Yeah, well, a structural thing, or the government has the option to say, we'll wait you out. And if you really think that you're going to get a better deal on the other side of the election, which I think is I'd say that would be a highly questionable judgment for the AU to make if they did. But yeah, at that point, there is going to be a limit on how much money can be thrown at this problem, because there are other problems to deal with as well.
You don't think Jess Wilson and the Liberals will be running to the aid of the Education Union?
Well, it's all very 2010 vibes. Ted Baillieu once promised the world to Victorian teachers, and I think comprehensively failed to deliver. So I wish everybody luck if they want to roll that dice again. But I think they would do better under a Labor government, would be my suspicion, and I think they would be advised to take it now.
The cynic in me as well is interested in this character called Brendan Laws, who's a teacher, and he's a part of this Socialists in Schools, and apparently he's the candidate in Niddry, which is the Premier's seat. And they're also, the Victorian Socialists are contesting a whole bunch of other seats.
I think they're contesting. I think they've said they're going to contest every seat.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, there you go.
Well, they're going to try to anyway.
Yeah, and I just wonder, is the intention here by the Socialists genuinely to strike a better deal, or pressure the union to go and negotiate and strike a better deal for the broader membership? Or is this just an opportunity for them to build a better profile for Mr. Laws to get a Jagger win against the Premier in his own seat?
Yes, well, I think that is a very valid question that has a probably knowable answer. Yeah, well, I think they're definitely the socialists as a political party have been getting more and more organised the last couple of cycles here in Victoria. They are now very organised, and I think will have a substantial impact in a number of mainly inner city seats in November. I think this kind of, as you say, profile building is certainly going to align with that objective.
Yeah. Look, and to answer the final part of your question, Roger, how does the AU shut down the Victorian Socialists? Look, I don't think you can shut them down, but I think what it does require is for the union and their organisers to properly or better engage with their delegate structure across all of their schools and support their delegates in actually engaging with their members in each of those schools and get a better understanding of exactly what the teachers want, but also to pass down to them exactly the position they are in terms of their negotiations and be real with them. I'm not suggesting they haven't been real with them, but I wonder if there's been a bit of a communication breakdown across the union. There's a lot of members. It's huge.
It's a big union, and it covers the whole state. And I mean, this is also the first big ABA with this new leadership for the union as well. So there's all those factors at play.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just think if the union's got good structure, good processes, then they should just execute that strategy that they've got, and it just talking to your folks is the best way to overcome that, because you're not going to shut out the trots within it, but you need to make them look irrelevant. Thanks, Roger. Great question. The next question is from Gus, another Victorian one. Why does the Victorian press hate the Suburban Rail Loop so much? I wonder if Gus has asked other SRL questions in the past. I'm not sure. We have talked about this from time to time. Worthwhile, though, for our interstate listeners, for you, Lissie, to maybe go back to when the project was first announced, how it was announced, and how did the media respond to it on that glorious sunny day on top of a building out in Box Hill, I think it was, from memory.
It was Box Hill. I think it's fair to say there are a variety of reactions, Stephen, but I'm happy to step it out for people, just a little bit of a trip down memory lane. So if we go back to 2018, which is now 8 years in the past and 2 election cycles here in Victoria, the Suburban Rail Loop is basically a 90-odd kilometre orbital rail line around Melbourne, which for those of you who have and interstaters who've visited, Melbourne is, shall we say, blessed with very significant urban sprawl. Our rail lines are all to radial networks. Everything runs into the centre of the city, and you can't really get around in a sort of north-south or around the city without going into the centre, which is, of course, impractical for many, many reasons. So the Suburban Rail Loop was originally conceived out of the public service, actually, contrary to rumour and speculation, and put to government in sort of late 17, early 18 as a way to basically re-engineer how the city moved and how the city grew, because Melbourne is also experiencing enormous population growth. So rather than continuing to pile people into the centre of the CBD, we could start putting people out in activity centres around the middle ring suburbs. Urban planning lesson over. Anyway, so after a whole lot of work, the government then in 2018, in August of that year, we announced that we would, we announced the concept for the project, and we announced it at 7 a.m. in the morning on Facebook. And the response from the print media was not that keen. They don't like things being announced on government's own social media channels generally, because it takes it away from them. The response on Talkback Radio was extremely positive when the Premier was doing his blitz of announcements that morning. And I went back and looked the other day at how it all ran, and like The Age had its live blog going for that day, and a lot of the reader feedback that they were reporting back throughout the day was extremely positive. As a project that just made sense. So I think its initial response from people was pretty positive. I don't think certain sections of the media ever got over the fact that it was announced on social media. Would be my short summary.
Hey?
Would be my short summary.
Yeah, good summary. And then obviously, I was a part of this. I was still a party official in 2018, campaigned on it out in the areas where it would go or be, implemented or whatever you want to call it. Did we win the 2018 election?
Actually, Stephen, we did comprehensively win the 2018 election. We also comprehensively won the 2022 election.
Yeah. So could you argue there's a mandate for it within the electorate twice?
I would argue that. And I think I also think it is easy maybe now with the passage of time to forget some of these key points. But the Labor Party had contested the 2014 election from opposition in opposition to a road project called the East-West Link. And one of the reasons that we were opposed to that is because the then Liberal government had taken it to that election, signed the state up to a whole lot of money with literally a side letter, but had never taken that project to an election, so it didn't have any electoral mandate. So when we were looking at the Suburban Rail Loop project less than 4 years later, we were, one of the things that informed all the politics of infrastructure back in this state at that time was that if you were going to do a big project that was new, then you needed to have an electoral mandate for it because it was not reasonable to do otherwise. And frankly, we would have been wild hypocrites if we'd done the same thing as the Libs had done 4 years earlier. So the work was done in government by government on the concept, but before we threw any significant money at it, we put it on the ballot and said people need to say whether they actually want this and whether they endorse it. As it turned out, they did comprehensively endorse it, and it's been popular ever since. I'm
not a policy person by any stretch of the imagination, but as someone who's travelled around the world a little bit and seen urban growth and how cities deal with it and move people around, it just it makes sense. It's good public policy. It's long-term strategic thinking. The Age are a paper that thinks it's the thinking person's paper and is always thinking about long-term policies about how we can change the shape of our state and the shape of our
plan for the future.
Yeah, exactly right. They're always doing series on that. I think they're doing one at the moment about Melbourne. This is long-term thinking right here. Like, you want an example of it, this is it. Like, if anyone's ever been to Tokyo, one of the most populated cities on the planet, they've got, their train network is insane, right? But one of the most significant pieces is the Yamanote line, which is around about 34-kilometre circular train system that just loops around the city, but it loops intentionally and connects up with all the 8 other major sort of hubs of networks that run out of the centre of the city of Tokyo. And if you think about Melbourne as a city, and I think a lot of these journalists don't think about this because none of them live out in these parts of the city, but you think about places like Cheltenham, like around Monash Uni, like around Box Hill, Doncaster, Latrobe, Broadmeadows as you move to the top of the city, Broadmeadows, and then down through into the west, Melbourne Airport, where all the way through to Werribee. That's where our city is growing, and those people need public transport, and they don't all want to come into the city, and us planning to build that, I think, is a very, very smart thing. Now, here's the bit I know more about politics. It's good politics. Like, it was so obvious in 2018. We won all these seats in the eastern suburbs that we should never have won. And I still remember I was in CHQ and we were looking at all the results coming in, and I remember seeing when Ringwood came in, and I was like, oh my God, like, if we're winning Ringwood, we're obviously going to absolutely belt this election in. But in my, the political orthodoxy would be, well, that was a fluke. Because Braxi did well in the eastern suburbs as well in the Brax side in 2002. But, our government in 2022 continued to say, no, we're doing this. And then we win all those seats again, proving thus it wasn't a fluke. And then the federal government backed it in again in 2024, and we picked up all those seats as well. Like, we're winning the hearts and minds of a whole group of voters that historically we'd never had before, and proving that it's not a fluke. And we need to continue to hold those seats. And Suburban Rail Loop plays a critical role in that. So the politics is important.
I do think there is a bit of it is a legitimate view, I think, to have a different view than the government does, and say, well, than the government has had, and say, I don't think Suburban Rail Loop is the best answer to the population growth and the transport needs of Victoria. That's okay. You can have that view. You may think that other things are priorities. That's a perfectly reasonable debate to have. However, I think to your point earlier about, when we talk, everyone spends a lot of time and a lot of column inches talking about, well, we need city shaping, big plans for the future. Governments have got to stop, only looking forward in 4-year cycles. So the government did all of that. It offered this project will take decades to finish. It is expensive. Of course it's expensive. But anything that is going to have the kind of impact that this project will is going to cost a lot and take a long time. So you can say that this one is not the right one, but it cannot be only because of the cost and the time taken to deliver it. That cannot be reasonably the only basis of your argument, because anything else that is going to have a significant impact is also going to take a very long time and cost a lot of money. And so I do think there has been a large amount of media sort of contention about this almost solely because of cost, when the reality is, projects like Sydney Metro and I'm sure all the ones you just reeled off in Japan as well, like none of these are cheap. If you are trying to build heavy rail in already built environments, particularly if you're requiring tunnelling, it's expensive and it takes a long time. That in and of itself is not a reason not to pursue the kind of city shaping that these projects can deliver. There is also, I would say, a lot of intrigue, the vast majority of it wildly overdone about the origins of the project. I think that story has been examined and done to death. People think that, the government just invented it on a bit of paper somewhere. It was not invented by politicians. It was conceived of in the bureaucracy. It was kept very tight prior to the announcement. There is a very good reason for that, though, and that is because if you are going to go out there and say we're going to do something that is going to dramatically change land values across a vast tract of land all around the middle of Melbourne, then you are going to immediately prompt a whole lot of land speculation. And so there's a very good probity reason why it was kept very tight before the announcement, because to do otherwise would have been wildly irresponsible. So people kind of attribute all these wild conspiracy theories to the whole thing. It's really not that complicated.
Yeah. And also look at the way that the Liberals have responded to it. They don't want to touch it. They know it's a winner. And they're like,
they've been wedging themselves on the fence about this thing for a really long time now.
Pardon the pun, but it's the third rail for eastern suburbs politics, and how are the Liberal Party going to win back their heartland, because they don't know what to do about this suburban rail loop thing, because they think that actually it's quite popular amongst the kind of voters that used to vote for them.
Well, and don't forget, so there are actually, in fact, 2 parts of Suburban Rail Loop already underway. One is that eastern Suburban Rail Loop East, which is, as you say, coming up through, Clayton and Glen Waverley and the other eastern suburbs. The other part is Airport Rail, which is going through the northwest and will form part of the loop as well. And then it will ultimately, the intention is to go down to Werribee, and then the northern section will, as you say, go up through Broadmeadows. Incidentally, the next part on the eastern side is to go up through Doncaster, which has never, ever had rail access, despite broken promises from the Liberal Party. So, look, the project is going to take decades to finish. That was always forecast. These things don't get done quickly. I do think that we are probably at a point now where we're far enough into the project that at this point people should really start thinking about what's next rather than relitigating the past constantly. We are, in practical terms, past that.
The last thing I'll say on this, the Age have form, because they've done this before. If you remember in the mid-2000s, the issue around the channel deepening, the Bracks and then Brumby governments, they were going to deepen the shipping channels so bigger container ships could get into the Port of Melbourne, which is really important for our trade and our business and our local economy. Straightforward piece of infrastructure, but it became this years-long story about the death of Port Phillip Bay, toxic algae blooms, seagrass wiped out, nitrogen belts tipping past the point of recovery, there was dredge protests in kayaks in exclusion zone and federal court challenges, and the Age just they went all in on this one. I remember Brumby having to come out and say that if we don't do this, we'd become a backwater like Adelaide and die a slow death. Which was quite funny because then obviously we had a Labor government in Adelaide as well, and a friend of mine who was working in Brumby's office got a phone call from, I think, the Chief of Staff then to Mike Rann or someone complaining, why did Brumby say that? He was like, just go with it. Let's just have a fight between Victoria. Yeah, exactly. Let's have a fight between Victoria and South Australia. It's good for you. It's good for us.
Everybody wins except the age.
Yeah, exactly. But in the end, the project was finished in 2009 and it was ahead of schedule, under budget. Yeah, and it was a huge success. And none of that stuff that they talked about for months and months and months happened. And in fact, Jason Dowling, who was in the Age reporter, hailed it as a huge success, and the bay is clean.
Yeah, so I actually, in a previous life, worked on the government's advertising campaign for that back in my first ever consulting gig a billion years ago. And so we had to do a truckload of research about all the scientific, facts and everything, and they were pretty good ads in the end. But yet none of it was all fine.
Yeah. And so I just say to the Age, you're not great at picking winners when you go in on a campaign, are you?
Yeah, and I think in 20 years people are going to look back and think this was ridiculous as a campaign that was run against the project that by that time, at least, the eastern section and Airport Rail will be well and truly finished.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you so much, Gus, for that question. Next question is actually a bunch of people texting me this week saying you're going to talk about the gambling reform that's before the federal parliament. And it sort of was a little bit discussed at the ALP National Conference in Adelaide the other week. But I'm keen to get your thoughts on this. Lissie, I don't know if you've been following it, but just to give folks a bit of an overview, there is a bill that is before the Parliament now. It was introduced by Communications Minister and friend of the pod, Annika Wells, on the 2nd of July. What's in it? I understand there's betting ads capped at 3 per hour, ads banned during live sport within this sort of window of, I think it's like 6 a.m. to 8:30 p.m, banning of gambling advertising inside stadiums and on player jerseys, which I wish they would bring that into Scotland because that daft bet is just ruining that current Celtic jersey, and it really annoys me. There's so much gambling sponsorship in British football. Online ads are restricted to verified, logged-in adults, and it's going to come in on the 1st of January 2027 and be phased in over 3 years. And there's a Senate Environment and Communications Committee report that's being handed down on next Monday, the 17th of August, my understanding is. Mm-hmm. What's the overall debate here? Because I think what's happening is that Labor is getting buffeted from both, I guess it's left flank with MPs, senators like David Pocock in the Senate and the Greens saying that it's not going far enough. And then on the right flank, they're getting pressure because the Liberals are obviously, well, not obviously, but I think that the gambling lobby is putting pressure both on the Liberal Party and also on the government as well to tone it down a bit. Has the government got the right settings here in this piece of legislation, do you think?
Well, it's a hard question to answer from outside the negotiations, Stephen, but I do think that this is one of these issues that I think it is fair to say just about everybody would probably like to go further, and it is not necessarily through a lack of will or interest or care that the package will land inevitably somewhere short of what a lot of people would like. Issues like this are it's one of these things in government where you just smash into the reality of what is already in existence in terms of commercial arrangements and contracts and viability in this case of sporting leagues. And you're trying to reduce harm, which is obviously the objective of the whole thing, particularly protecting kids from exposure to this advertising. But part of what they'll be trying to deal with is the fact that the broadcast deals for the major sporting leagues with AFL, NRL, so on and so forth, all have gambling advertising revenue built into them, and is a very large part of that. And so having to unwind a bunch of those things is, one, difficult. So you'll have the sports leagues will absolutely be, in here lobbying on this as well. And then they will be saying to government and to the opposition, everybody else, if we have reduced revenue, then we will have to start cutting our cloth. And they usually start by cutting things like community sport, women's sport, things like that, which are, they know, pressure points for political parties. So it will be about trying to find, no one will end up feeling good about this, I suspect, but it will be a better situation than the status quo, which the Prime Minister said when he was doing media this week. Like the Labor and the Coalition will, it looks like, come to an agreement of some kind. The crossbench will hate it. A large part, I suspect, of the Labor's backbench will also be very unhappy about it. But it will be, it'll be take the deal that's available or revert to the status quo. And it is one of those, there are plenty of days in government, in my experience, where sometimes you don't feel great at the end of the day, but you're better off, you have advanced further than where you started, and you live to fight another day. And I suspect this is going to be one of those issues.
I agree with you there. And I think that, to the heart of the point you're making, the challenge of trying to wean yourself off of this kind of money is not easy for these for these sporting associations. It's big business. But if there's any kind of hope, then I think that, look, I don't follow AFL, so I'm not really across this, but I get a sense from my own experience in dealing with some of the football clubs, is that even internally within clubs, there was a cultural shift that occurred at some point where clubs had decided, by virtue of the fact that their own membership had pressured them, or stakeholders had sort of had a quiet word in their ear and sort of said, this is a very Victorian thing. I don't know if this is the case in Sydney, because I understand that certainly the leagues clubs do have a lot of pokie machines, but in Victoria, in the AFL, there was a move by clubs to take some ownership on this issue and actually wean themselves off of
some clubs, yes, not all though.
No, yeah. But I mean, my own experience when I was involved in the Hawks for Change campaign, that was one of the things that came up amongst the membership in terms of their disappointment with the then leadership under former Victorian Liberal Premier Jeff Kennett when he was president of the club. One of the issues that was raised by a lot of the members was, we're still taking money from pokies. Where we've seen other rival clubs, like big clubs, say, well, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And they're saying, why are we still doing that? How are other clubs achieving a strong fiscal position but not relying on gambling money? And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that if government can provide some leadership to AFL and the NRL and whatever sort of major sporting leagues out there to say, it's time. This piece of legislation is just the beginning, but it's time now that we all need to start to get your affairs in order, that you're not taking money from gambling, and switch to dirty oil.
I think that'd be a good message for them to get, to say, this is the beginning of our reform journey. It is not the end. I think that, and look, I think from the government's perspective, that would be an important message to give. I think their people internally as well as externally. Whether the Prime Minister wants to do that, I don't know. The problem, if you're going to take out a large revenue stream, which this definitely is, from an organisation, whether it's AFL or similar, it takes a lot of time and effort and just coordinated willpower to do the work that is required to then find a way to replace that with something else. It's hard because the leagues have built themselves up around this, and so having to deconstruct that is hard. So, long lead times help, obviously. Government giving people a clear message about what the future is going to look like, even though we're not there yet, that will help too. I think whatever they get through this week, I think everyone is going to end up being unhappy one way or the other. But if they do get it through, the rules will be tighter than they are as we sit here today. And that's a good thing.
And cricket, I should.
Cricket indeed.
Shouldn't leave cricket out as well. You can't.
You can bet on anything these days, right?
You can't get through an over at the cricket without being told what the odds are of this next delivery.
Yeah.
Okay, let's turn our attention. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a thing that I have decided to call Around the Grounds. There's a lot happening around the world at the moment, and you and I off the show do talk about it a bit, just in our own kind of social catch-ups.
It's with those kind of nerds.
Yeah, exactly. And we're calling it Around the Grounds. I'm calling it Around the Grounds because any of the former field organisers circa 2013 through to 2018, well, maybe they didn't know about this, but every Saturday, me and my senior leadership team within the field program caught up and we had a meeting which was called Around the Grounds, and it was based on when you used to listen to 3LO or ABC Radio in the footy season on Grandstand. They would have a thing called Around the Grounds, where they would have someone from the ABC station at all the games back in the day when footy all played footy in suburban grounds and they were all playing at the same time, and you'll get updates about what the scores were. That meeting was designed to get an update about how we're tracking in each of these target seats with all of our field organisers across 20, 25 seats. So yes, field organisers, we did talk about you every Saturday afternoon in great detail about how you're going, but only to support you and make sure that you succeeded in the work that you're doing. Anyway, so let's do a bit of Around the Grounds around the world, starting in UK politics, because there's a by-election this week happening. Actually, probably by the time the show's dropped, we'll know the result. It's the Clacton-on-Sea by-election, which is sort of coastal town, very white, older electorate. The current member is Nigel Farage, the leader for the Reform Party. He won the seat in 2024 with 46.2% of the vote. It was his seventh time that he attempted to get into Parliament. The background is that he resigned from that seat on the 8th of July, mid-investigation. He had received a £5 million payment from Christopher Harborne. It was then referred to the National Crime Agency over money laundering concerns, plus questions on gifts in kind and property declarations. So Farage decided he was copping a lot of heat over this. I think his initial argument was, well, I wasn't an MP when I received it, so therefore it wasn't a donation that was related to, and I didn't have to declare it. But the media weren't going away, and nor was the Parliament, because then he was called before a parliamentary inquiry into the donations that were made to him. So he decided to resign as the member for the seat, thus creating a by-election. The Labor, the Tories and the Lib Dems decided not to run against him. And the only person that is now running against him is basically a character from an episode of Monty Python's Flying Circus, because he's running against Count Binface, who you may remember from such TV shows as the Andy Burnham's by-election victory, which is, if you'd followed UK politics, this happens all the time. There's always colourful characters. Literally, it was a sketch in Monty Python, but that's the contest now. The contest is between, it's a cast of thousands running, but the main candidate that's running against him is a dude who has a trash can on his head. What do you think about this, Lissie?
Well, firstly, I think the other major parties have made the right decision in not running, and I think their variously stated reasons are that they don't want to give Farage some kind of fake, vindication by him potentially, winning the seat over. I hesitate to say real candidates, because I think Count Binface is, taking a pretty fair swing at the whole thing. So. May yet poll quite well, but I think that was the right call. What he's doing is a stunt. It should be treated accordingly, which is why I think it's apt that he's perhaps running against a garbage bin. But yeah, look, Farage. It's interesting at the moment. I think the latest polling in the UK is indicating that Reform is having maybe a little bit of a similar experience to what we're seeing in some of the polls back home here federally, in that One Nation is just, and Reform over there are just starting to plateau a little. And we're seeing over there at least, the major parties are there are early signs they're just starting to sort of consolidate the vote a little bit. So Labor's going up a bit after their leadership change. Greens are coming down. Reforms come down a bit, Conservatives up a little bit. So it's not earth-shattering. It's not long enough yet to be a trend on either side. But it is possible, hopeful maybe, that reform has maybe just had the sheen taken off it just a little.
I'm wondering, clearly this podcast does not agree with the politics of Nigel Farage in any way, shape or form whatsoever, but he's a shrewd politician. He's good on the stump. He looks, I mean, you can understand why a certain type of voter appealed to the way he conducts himself.
Well, he's a master of grievance politics, right?
Yeah, and notwithstanding the fact that he's had 7 attempts to try to get into Parliament and has lost every time. But so he's not that shrewd, but also he was, in some degrees, the mastermind of Brexit, which has fundamentally changed the way that British politics operates entirely. Like, it is the biggest evolution in the political system in the UK.
And has played a significant role in the Tories blowing themselves apart too.
Yeah.
It's not the only reason, but it's certainly a big part of their problem.
Yeah. I feel like this might be the first significant misstep by Farage. Like, he felt the heat, and in that moment of heat, I think strategically he may have made he's made a call, and I don't think he predicted the reaction that he would get from his opponents, namely, to your point, the Labor, the Tories and the Lib Dems saying, well, okay, we see your move and we are not going to respond to it, which has now led it. And reading from a lot of the reports and the vox pops of voters locally, they're sort of going, I don't know why we're going back to the polls. Like, I don't understand why we're doing this. And what Farage has done is he's broken one of the cardinal rules of politics. He's made an election about himself.
Yeah. And there's nothing about this election that's about the voters in that constituency, like nothing. So he can't, in some senses, even if he wins, he can't win, because if he wins, he will have beaten Count Binface, which everyone will say, well, of course you should have.
Otherwise your campaign's garbage.
Yeah. There's puns abound. There's so many different options. But yeah, he's I think this is one of these things where I think he's overreached.
And the timing actually is reasonably good for newly elected Labor leader Andy Burnham. Like, it's giving him a bit of clear space, because the media and the attention is really focusing on this coastal electorate while this bin fire of a by-election happens. It takes time to set up shop, get your people in, work out what your objectives are and how you're going to sort out your policies and your ideas and your agenda and whatever, all that kind of stuff, right? And so while that's happening, he's got an opportunity actually to do that and just sort of get his feet under the desk, which you wouldn't have normally had that opportunity.
No, it's providing some helpful cover for him. I mean, he's, as you say, he's going through the difficult process of trying to reset the administration of the government while they're in government, which is always a nightmare. But it's one of those things. And Burnham's come out with some. He's made some announcements early that are, different from where Starmer was at on various things. But the problem that leaders who take over partway through a term always have is that none of the problems that were problems before disappear. You either have to have different solutions for them, which is not always possible, or you have to somehow be better at solving them than the person you took over from was, which again is not always certainly not easy. It's also not always possible. So he's struggling to work out how to, the prisons in the UK are too overcrowded. They were going to early release a whole lot of prisoners because they just have to create space. And he's now having this problem of trying to work out how he can do that while still trying to walk back part of that policy from Starmer and keep certain prisoners locked up, indefinitely and this sort of thing. So government remains a nightmarishly hard, complex, and highly sensitive place to try and run. And the fact that they've changed the Prime Minister doesn't make any of that any less true.
No. Okay, let's jump across the pond and go to the US. There's been a round of Democratic primaries held in the last couple of weeks, and will continue to be. There'll be more of them happening over the next sort of month or so as we get closer and closer to the midterms. In this instance, the midterms is every seat in the House of Representatives is up for re-election, and a section of the Senate is up for a re-election, a bit similar to in Australia, and a whole bunch of governor races are also up for election in this midterm cycle. One thing I was interested in talking to you about is, and the big story coming out of the US, particularly on the Democratic side of these primaries, is some of the victories that we've seen from candidates that are identified within this, I guess, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Some people who are aligned with the Democratic Socialists of America, some that are actual members of the DSA, some members that have just got DSA endorsement, versus what would be regarded as the moderate or more centrist side of the Democratic Party. And the biggest one that people are paying attention to is in the state of Michigan, in which Abdul El-Sayed, who isn't a member of the DSA but certainly was endorsed by the DSA, he's seen as a progressive candidate, has defeated Haley Stevens, who was the centrist or the more moderate, or I guess the more established-backed candidate. The governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, endorsed her candidacy. So did Alana Slotkin, who's the other Democratic senator of Michigan. But it was a close race. The polls had El-Sayed winning by a truckload, but in the end, he won by a point, 48.5 to 47.5. It was super close. And so a lot of people are saying, this is the way to win. We need more progressive candidates. This is a Rust Belt, Midwestern battleground purple seat or state, which is not like what happened in New York with, say, Mayor Mamdani, because New York's obviously a very uber blue city, but this is a different kind of example. What do you make of the victory, particularly here in Michigan? And what does it mean for the Democrats going forward? Is this the pathway forward?
Well, I think the answer is, I think, clearly in seats that are, or seats or races that are traditionally blue, then some of these, and they're not all necessarily DSA aligned, but these much more sort of left-wing progressive candidates are having some success. But breaking news, while we're recording this, one of the other big races that was being contested in a similar sort of, more mainstream institutional candidate versus a DSA candidate was the Wisconsin gubernatorial primary. And the results only just come in while we've been recording this. Hot off the press, Lissie. Hot off the press. Me and the New York Times in this together. But David Crowley, who's the sort of more mainstream candidate, despite dropping out of the race a month ago and then re-entering said race, has just barely, by about 3,000 votes, defeated Francesca Hong, who was the sort of more progressive of the two candidates. That was a really down to the wire one. But again, Wisconsin's one of those seats that
same deal.
Yeah, like it's a swing state now, and one that I think Trump has won, albeit not by a huge margin, last time. So that was something else that people were not sure which way it was going to go, and it's been kind of neck and neck all day as the votes have been coming in, and he's just gotten over the line very narrowly. So, do I think there's going to be this whole wave of these candidates like smashing through kind of purple state primaries? No. But do I think more of them are going to come through in blue states? I mean, by all accounts, yes. Like we're kind of where we started with the AU question a little bit. Like these groups on the sort of more ultra progressive side of the Democratic Party, like they're organised, and they're, when you get organised, then you have a bigger impact, and that's what they're doing. I would note though they had they bombed out pretty hard in the main Senate race a few weeks ago, where their handpicked candidate had a variety of very significant problems in character, and didn't do any proper vetting. And that's a Senate seat that the Democrats desperately need to win if they're going to flip the Senate. And it is now, I think, very likely that they will not be able to do that because their candidate has had to withdraw.
Oh, my God, talk about shitting the bed.
Yeah.
That was just... Like, I remember that... What was his... Graham Plattner. I remember when he first came on the scene, we were in the States for the US mission last year.
Yeah.
and he was starting to get a little bit of airtime in, but mostly up in the northeast media sort of market, not at a national level. Because I went up to Boston, obviously, to catch up with my sporting team.
You, Boston, really?
Yeah, but certainly in that, I mean, New England sort of it's one big sort of media cycle. So it was for the main news, it was Washington, the Boston stuff, and and I saw some of his stump speeches, and he was, there was once again,
I could give a good speech.
Yeah, authenticity. He was very authentic. He was working class. He looked working class. I think his background certainly was working class-ish.
I think ish being the...
Yeah, but then after we got back from the States, that's when we all found out about the Totenkampf Nazi SS tattoo on his chest. And I sort of thought, oh, well, he's done. Like, that's it.
But it turns out he wasn't done.
No. I was like, what? Wait, what? We're still, sticking with this guy? We're sticking with the Nazi? We're still doing that?
Yeah, so we stuck with the Nazi tattoo guy, and then we stuck with the many, many, many Reddit posts guy. And then there was an allegation about sexual assault, which was regarded or dismissed by a number of, or by many, many people as being not credible, because the woman in question had subsequently become, a Republican staffer of some kind. And then we get into what was then deemed and I use this term because everybody else has been using it, credible rape allegation, at which point he's done and they pull out. But it does beg the question a little bit, like how much, and we've talked about this on the right wing of politics, where we've got all these, we've got a number of candidates. Farage, we've already talked about. Donald Trump is another one. Some of the things that Pauline Hanson's been up to here, like there are populist candidates on the right who are getting away with behaviours and statements that traditionally would, to your point, finish anybody in a normal electoral contest, and it doesn't seem to be, they're all sort of Teflon. But there is some of this happening on the far left as well now, and that main Senate race is a good example where clearly it was just let to go on way too long.
Yeah. So coming back to Michigan then, I thought about that, and I know that everyone that listens to this show knows my own sort of internal party politics, and that won't surprise anyone that I say that I don't think I would actually vote for Al Sayed if I had a vote in the primary. But I do want to talk about, it's not all black and white. Like, there are some common denominators that I am starting to see when progressive Democrats do succeed in the primary. And one of the common denominators is that when the progressive left select just strong candidates, like articulate, that they present well, and often they're good looking. And I don't mean to say that in a superficial way, but I mean, it helps, right?
Well, they're also substantially younger.
Yeah, younger, strong personal stories, can talk about, who they are, where their values were shaped, backed up by good campaign messaging that is connected to the concerns that voters in that electorate they're speaking to understand and relate to. Whereas the opposite of it, so these are the positives, right, of that type of candidate. But when pitted against, and this is important as well, but then when pitted against campaigns and candidates that are average. Hayley Stephens was an average candidate. She really was. I'm sorry. Like, I went and had a proper look at her. I went, no, Hayley, you mean well, but you're a dud. You're an absolute dud. And, Cuomo in New York against Mamdani. Like, he had his day, right? But that was in the 1830s. And when we were in New York, we were meeting with folks who were long-term like New York City Democrat consultants that had long memories, that had worked for Cuomo in the 90s. And these guys were centrists. These were not Mamdani people. And they were like, I am giving all of my resources to Mamdani because I hate Cuomo. I do not want him to win. Like, he was poisoned within the Democratic Party. And there was parts of the establishment were holding their nose and going, oh, God. Like, so you've got this contrast between young, dynamic, good candidates and then these centrist duds. No wonder they're winning,
Well, and it's also a failure of renewal, right? Like, so you've got part of the reason they're going and looking for these, new kind of shining star candidates is because the Democratic Party has a problem with the fact that so many of its elected representatives are like they're in their 70s. They've been in office in some cases for decades and decades, and they're showing no interest in possibly giving way to the next generation.
No.
So when you're putting someone who's been in office for 35 years and is 75 up against someone who's, 38 and, as you say, got a good personal story, is a good communicator, is a digital native because they're 38, and, backed by an organised campaign machine, well then, yeah, you're going to have it'll be a contest, and you'll have you'll have institutional support and big money on one side, and then you'll have an exciting campaign that people want to actually get around on the other side. Yeah. If the, inverted commas, mainstream Democratic Party wants to keep holding ground, it needs to find better candidates, it needs to get better stories, and it needs to get organised. And big money's not going to be enough to hold back all of these other insurgents, basically.
Yeah, and I know that's the other part of the story that you're right, Lissie, I didn't mention, is that there was a lot of money poured into the Haley Stevens campaign. They spent if you look at sort of dollar for dollar, vote for vote, they spent 5 times more than what the LSED campaign spent, and it just also demonstrates that all the things I've just spoken about, plus backed up with a strong organising strategy, can result in you winning. But look at it, you won by a point. Look at how close it was, right? Mm. The cons on it. So I guess the things where I'd say just don't get too excited. Is this? This was just a primary, people. This was literally an internal ballot of the Democratic community. The real test whether this particular strategy or this type of candidate that we're talking about in terms of being from the progressive side, the progressive wing of the party, is going to be successful, well, we'll find that out in November when they go up against a Republican. And when Republicans and independent voters have to vote. And just to break this down, this is interesting here in Michigan, and Lissie, you and I are in Michigan in 2024 for the presidential. Ann Arbor, which is the home of U of M, University of Michigan, like college students, academics, it's a absolutely. If you ever go to Michigan, go to Ann Arbor. It's one of the most beautiful towns you'll ever go to, but wealthy, liberal elites. LSA had won that 61-36, that county. Grand Rapids, another college town, but also a lot of young urban people who can't afford to live in Detroit are moving out there. It's a growing population. LSA had won at 61-35. Let's go back to Detroit, where you and I door knocked for a week. High black working class community. It's Detroit. It's Detroit. It's the heart of Detroit. Stevens beat El Sayed 51-45. Oakland County, middle class, out of suburban Detroit. Stevens won that one 52-45. I always know how to pronounce it, Macomb County, working class folks, all would be mostly working in the auto industry. Stevens won that 52-44. Incidentally, that county, Trump won in 2024 against Harris, and won by about, I think it was around about 60,000 votes. And actually that was the district, or that was the county that tipped Trump to hold Michigan. So it's those, you want to be looking at those seats, those counties, Wayne County, Oakland County, Macomb County. LSED has to do well in those counties, in particular Macomb County, because if you can't win the votes of the traditional working class, blue collar voters at the midterms, then they're not going to hold. I think he's going to struggle to win the Senate seat in Michigan. So I just want to sort of, I guess what I'm trying to say to folks is let's just sort of wait and see how this transpires in the actual midterm, as opposed to getting excited about.
The other challenge they're going to have to get themselves in a position then to go out and appeal to the whole general electorate is that they've got to unite the Democratic Party behind the candidates who have won these. And a lot of these primaries they're very hard fought. Some of them are getting very personal and sort of very, there's a lot of animosity between the candidates and their supporters, probably more to the point. So it's partly going to speak to the Democratic Party's organised, much more around states than anything at the moment, I think. But how much those parties can, reunite behind whichever candidates come out in front. So in Wisconsin, it's the mainstream candidate. In Michigan, it's the ultra progressive candidate. So is everybody going to kind of band together and turn out to, door knock and canvass and organise for the winners? And I think that's going to be a big question as well, given how difficult some of these fights have been.
Well, I understand people like Gretchen Whitmer and that they've moved and have endorsed LC Ed. Even James Carville, the Raging Cajun, came out today and said, got to get behind LC Ed in Michigan.
Canada's candidate, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to. The Democrats want to win the Senate. They want to win the Senate.
Yeah.
And if they're going to win the Senate, you got to win Michigan. So I don't think they're going to be sitting around going, let's not completely get behind LC Ed just to sacrifice the fact that we don't get control of the US Senate. That is the name of the game. Someone who will be watching, I think, the race in Michigan with great intent in come this November is AOC, because if LC can carry Michigan and win the Senate spot from the hard left, then I think that does good things for her and her ambitions to run for to seek the Democratic nomination in 2028 for the presidency. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I think she's running. I think she is.
Well, she's definitely not running now, and I think her language has been getting more and more sort of open over the last weeks and months. So yeah, I'd agree. She's definitely hasn't closed herself off on it. The traditional orthodoxy about AOC would be that she could win on the coast and she can't win in the middle. Let's see, right? Look, she's someone who's, she's not as sort of far left as maybe she used to be or some people thought she was. Now that she's been in office for a while and actually had been doing the job. She's clearly one of the best communicators the party has at its disposal, and is comfortable across all mediums, whether it's, on the stump in front of a big crowd, on TV or, online. Communication 5 stars. But as you say, like Michigan's a good there'll be others, but that's a good litmus test. Can a more left-wing candidate win in states like that? And if they can, then I would imagine that she and whoever her campaign team that are assessing whether she should put her hat in the ring formally will be looking at things like that as proof points to say, well, yes, we can, or no, we can't.
Yeah. And I think it brings other states back onto the table as well, like Florida, because of a Latino background and the strong Latino vote in the southern part of the Panhandle state. Texas. We keep on talking about Texas as eventually going to swing blue. It never does. It never does.
I actually saw a video the other day, which was her going out and meeting with a whole bunch of Republican voters in, I can't remember what state, somewhere, maybe West Virginia, about a data center. Because she's on a committee that's looking into it, and they all, they were interviewed about what they thought about her before she showed up, and they all thought she was, a raging communist. And then after they'd spent an hour talking to her, they were basically 2 at 1. They were like, "Oh, she's actually, she's actually quite good. Yeah. She actually listened to us. She doesn't seem like a communist at all."
Who knew going and talking to voters is going to bring them around?
I know. What a radical concept.
Anyway, I think we really nerded out there, didn't we? I'm just fascinated. I'm fascinated by the AOC. I'm fascinated by the whole Democratic primaries for the presidential next time around as well. Look, and the argument is that you got Trump. You wouldn't have got Trump if we didn't have Obama. And I actually think maybe, just maybe, you don't get AOC unless you have Trump.
Yeah, I think, that's right. I mean, everybody, comes up, you grow up in the political kind of climate that's around you, and that forms people's, not only does it form people's views, but in many cases it informs whether they're willing to take action. And if you've got a kind of middle of the road kind of boring administration, then it doesn't tend to inspire as much excitement on either side of the aisle. But when you've got something as extreme as Trump has been, then, you inspire a lot of people on the left to actually get up and do something about it.
Yeah. What cultural share do you have this week that's sort of tangentially politically related?
It's actually directly politically related, but my culture share, as I was clicking around looking at the UK stuff before we did this episode, so I'm going to recommend yet another podcast that's not this one, but obviously everyone should listen to this one and other ones, is an episode of Political Currency, which is Ed Balls, who's a former UK Labor minister, and George Osborne, who's a former Tory senior minister, have this sort of left-right thing they do called political currency. Anyway, they've recently done an interview with Kemi Badenoch, who's the leader of the Tory party, who I think is a super interesting character or person in British politics right now, as the first black leader of any political party in the UK. She's quite young. She's 46. She's quite right-wing by her own assessment. So, Stephen, you and I would agree with very little of what she says in ideological terms. However, she's a very good she's become a very good communicator. She's got a good personal story. To your point earlier about good candidates, she's got a good personal story. She comes across as a very practical, common sense kind of person. She's an engineer by training. Maybe that's part of it. But I think, it was an interesting interview. She's an interesting person. Probably not an ideal time for her to come into the leadership of a party that's sort of not experiencing its best days. But yeah, I think she's an interesting person and someone to keep an eye on, because if anyone can pull them out of their problems they're having, then maybe it'll be her.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you on that. I find her fascinating. I mean, like you said, I don't agree with her politics, but I just can't help but listen to her. Like when she starts talking, I'm like going, I need to listen to you because you sound like you're speaking with some sense of authority as opposed to some,
Yeah, she's quite compelling.
Dead shit politician,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I sort of think has the Tories have just burned any goodwill with the electorate by cycling through so many bad leaders, Theresa May, Bojo, Liz Truss, oh my God, Rishi Sunak, and then now they've got her. But if she'd been the next leader after David Cameron, maybe the Tories might be in a better shape. I don't know, because she seems kind of normal.
She does seem kind of normal. I mean, we should point out her heroes are Margaret Thatcher and people like that. And she did support Brexit and still thinks it was a good idea and all these things. So she's not some kind of, super centrist, middle of the road type.
No,
she's a proper right winger.
Oh yeah, she's a Tory. From Central, but not from Central
Casting. To listen to regardless.
Yeah. My watch list share is, I'm just going to do it quickly, is Life, Larry and the Pursuit of Unhappiness. It's the new Larry David series. It's on HBO. It is a little bit political, and the very most recent episode, the way it works is he's placing himself in famous moments of American history in which he's being very Larry David. Like the Wright brothers, when they first flew the plane, he's sitting in between the two of them and he's complaining about, the seat, and he hates the middle seat, that kind of stuff. So it's very Larry David. If you like Larry David, you'll love it. If you don't like Larry David, you won't love it. But the last episode, he's an advisor to Obama.
I saw a clip of this.
Yes, yeah. And he accidentally spills sauce on his suit jacket, and he's got to go out. Obama's got to go out and do a press conference, and he said, "We'll just change. The only one he's got is this tan suit." and he goes, "You think I should wear? Oh yeah, no, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. What could go wrong?" So it's that kind of stuff. It's very, very funny. I love it. Love Larry David. So there you go. You need a laugh. Watch that.
Check it out.
All right, Lissie, thank you so much. Before we go, don't forget, folks, next Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. Trades Hall, 20th of August, Social Democratic Live, Fenny Files with Jesse McCrone, just $95. All the money goes to 4 great candidates. It's going to be a fun night. It's going to be a fun night. We're going to have fun, right? But we're also going to get fired up and get ready to try and win this damn election in November. So come along and support 4 wonderful Labor women and just listen to, fun podcast. We'll do categories and all that kind of shit like we normally do. I hope to see you all there. Tickets are available either in the show notes here on this podcast or if you go to our Instagram account and in the bio, you'll find a link there as well. So look forward to seeing you there. We'll go for a couple of beers afterwards. You should come up and say hello. Lissie, thank you so much again. I will see you next Thursday at Trades Hall.
Pleasure.
Until then, have a great week, everyone. Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.